May Allah bless your time. Our story today is titled Frozen Time Island, Stuck in Time. It is one of the fantasy stories. Close your eyes and listen. Once upon a time in a land far, far away, Ali, a seasoned fisherman from the village of Kamar on the shores of the Sultanate of Ishraq, knew the Arabian Sea as well as he knew the lines on his own weathered hands. His entire life had been spent navigating its waves in his small dhow, Al-Sadaf, braving the power of nature to provide for his family and neighbors. But this night was unlike any other. Since the setting of the desert sun, the sky had turned a bruised purple, and a sirocco wind howled like a djinn released from its ancient bottle. Ali initially paid little heed to the ominous signs, trusting in his years of experience and the sturdy construction of Al-Sadaf. He had sailed far beyond the familiar reefs, hoping for a generous catch after a spell of lean tides. Suddenly, without warning, a ferocious sandstorm descended. Walls of sand, whipped into towering dunes by the gale, crashed down upon his small vessel, tossing it about like a child's toy. Jagged streaks of lightning ripped across the sky, briefly illuminating the terrifying chaos of the storm. Ali fought with all his strength to hold the rudder steady, but the tempest's fury was overwhelming. Fine sand mixed with stinging spray lashed his face as the dhow filled with seawater, and Ali felt his hope dwindling with each brutal gust. The agonizing struggle endured for what felt like an eternity, until Ali succumbed to exhaustion and the biting cold. His last memory was a violent lurch and the splintering of wood, followed by a profound darkness. When he finally awoke, a deep ache permeated every muscle and bone. He slowly opened his eyes to find himself lying on soft, golden sand. Above, the sky was a clear, endless cerulean, and the morning sun cast a gentle warmth upon his shivering frame. Yet, an unsettling stillness clung to the air. Ali pushed himself up, his gaze sweeping across his unfamiliar surroundings. He was on the beach of an island he had never encountered in his many years at sea. Date palms stood motionless against the pale sky, their fronds as still as painted strokes. The waves, so violent just hours before, now lay frozen in mid-break, their foamy crests suspended like delicate white lace. A chill deeper than the sea's cold snaked through Ali's veins. He strained to find a rational explanation for the bizarre tableau, but his mind recoiled. Birds hung frozen in the air, a falcon with wings outstretched in a silent dive, a flock of smaller birds clustered together as if caught in an invisible net. He then looked back at the ocean. The majestic waves, poised to crash onto the shore, were arrested in their descent, their power held captive by an unseen force. A cold dread gripped Ali's heart. He had miraculously survived a brutal storm, only to find himself in a place where time itself seemed to have surrendered. With great effort, he rose to his feet and began to explore this strange isle. The interior was a dense oasis of bizarre flora, trees with crystalline leaves that glittered in the sunlight and luminous flowers frozen mid-bloom. Even the desert insects were held captive. Dragonflies with iridescent wings suspended above still pools, and scarabs frozen mid-roll across the unmoving sand. After a long and arduous trek inland, Ali reached what appeared to be the ruins of an ancient city. Crumbling sandstone structures, once grand, lined silent streets, now devoid of any sign of life. Heavy wooden doors stood ajar, revealing interiors frozen in time. Clay pots lay overturned, spilling petrified grains. Looms stood with threads half-woven, and in the courtyards, fountains were caught mid-flow, their water transformed into delicate sculptures of ice. In the heart of the ruined city, Ali discovered a vast plaza, and at its center, a magnificent statue crafted from a dark, obsidian-like stone. It depicted a regal woman adorned with intricate jewelry and a sorrowful expression etched upon her serene face. But this was no mere statue. The air around her shimmered faintly, and her eyes, though unblinking, held an unnerving sentience. Ali cautiously approached the figure, reaching out a hesitant hand to touch the cool, smooth stone of her garment. At that moment, a voice echoed within his mind, a voice as soft as the desert breeze, yet laden with an ancient sorrow. "Welcome, traveler from beyond. Many cycles of the moon have passed since a mortal has set foot upon this cursed island." Ali recoiled, his heart pounding in his chest. He spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but the plaza remained deserted. "Fear not. I am here, trapped within this endless moment." Ali turned back to the obsidian figure, and with a jolt, he understood. The regal woman, frozen in stone, was somehow communicating with him. Who are you? And what is this desolate place?" Ali stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "I am Queen Zahra, of the once great kingdom of Asmar. This island, once a jewel of tea, once a jewel of the East, is now a prison of suspended time, a victim of a malevolent sorcery that stole away the flow of moments." A wave of disbelief washed over Ali. He had heard tales of forgotten kingdoms and ancient curses whispered around desert campfires, but he had never imagined encountering such a thing. A sorcery? What happened here? And why have I, a simple fisherman, been brought to this forsaken place? Ali asked, his confusion growing. "Your arrival was not by chance, Fisherman of Ishraq. Destiny has woven your thread into the tapestry of our fate. Perhaps you are the one foretold, the outsider who can unravel the threads of this ancient curse and restore the sands of time to our desolate realm." The Obsidian Queen. Zahra's unseeing eyes seemed to pierce through him, and a profound sense of responsibility settled upon Ali's shoulders. His simple fishing trip had led him to the Isle of Frozen Time, and his life would never be the same. Ali stood before the Obsidian Queen Zahra, struggling to comprehend her words. She spoke to him with a voice like the rustling of palm fronds in a gentle breeze, soft yet distinct, resonating directly within the chambers of his mind. The sound did not emanate from her still lips, but rather echoed in his thoughts, like a distant memory or a waking dream. How are you speaking? You are frozen," Ali stammered, his eyes fixed on her serene features, which held a profound dignity and sorrow. "My physical form is bound by the sorcery, wanderer from Ishraq, but my spirit remains tethered to this moment, a silent witness to the suffering of my people and my own powerlessness. The curse touched only our physical shells, trapping us within this eternal stillness." Ali's mind raced. This was no mere dream. The ache in his muscles was real, and the silent city before him was a tangible reality. But how could a frozen queen communicate with him? Perhaps this was another facet of the strange curse that had befallen this place, this Isle of Asmar. What is this sorcery? And how did it claim your people?" Ali inquired, his initial fear slowly giving way to a burgeoning curiosity. Queen Zahra sighed silently, and Ali felt a wave of profound sorrow wash over the plaza, a palpable weight in the still air. It was the work of the Shadow King, Raziel, a sorcerer of immense power and malice, from the dark lands beyond the mountains of Kaf. He envied the prosperity and joy of our kingdom, and in a moment of vulnerability, when our hearts were unguarded, he unleashed a potent incantation, freezing time itself within the borders of Asmar. "And you? Why did you not flee his wrath?" Ali pressed. "I was attempting to shield my people. As the sorcery began to spread like a creeping shadow, I gathered all my mystical energies to try and halt its advance. But Raziel's power was formidable, and he managed to ensnare me in this timeless instant, before I could fully unravel his dark magic." Ali's gaze swept across the silent city, taking in the figures frozen in their daily routines, the vibrant market stalls now petrified displays, the children caught in mid-laughter. A deep sadness welled within him for these souls trapped in an unending pause. Is there a way to break this enchantment? Ali asked, a growing desire to help taking root in his heart. A faint hope remains, traveler of Ishraq. Legend speaks of Raziel's sorcery being vulnerable only to something precious that he lost, and in a place that no longer exists within this frozen moment. Something precious? And a place that no longer exists? That sounds like a riddle wrapped in the desert wind, Ali mused aloud. Indeed. Yet perhaps being an outsider, untouched by the frozen currents of our time, you can perceive what we, bound within this stillness, cannot. Perhaps you can find the key where we have failed. As Queen Zahra spoke, Ali's attention was drawn to a flicker of movement in the shadows behind one of the crumbling buildings. It was a distorted form, a grotesque amalgamation of different creatures, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it were struggling to reconcile conflicting moments in time. What is that? Ali asked, pointing towards the shifting shadow. Those are the remnants of time, twisted by Raziel's curse. The full sorcery did not entirely freeze their essence, but instead shattered their connection to the linear flow of moments, causing them to flicker between different temporal states. They are often disoriented and dangerous, their minds fractured by the disjointed streams of time. The distorted shape lurched closer, revealing a terrifying visage. It possessed the hulking torso of a desert lion, but with the multiple darting eyes of a sand viper and limbs that seemed to shift between the talons of a great bird and the clawed paws of a jackal. It moved in a series of unpredictable twitches and starts, as if attempting to walk in several moments simultaneously, creating a horrifyingly disjointed gait. You must exercise extreme caution, traveler. These temporal echoes can be aggressive if they sense your presence, especially one untainted by our frozen time, Queen Zahra warned, her mental voice tinged with urgency. But why has it not attacked us yet? Ali wondered, a knot of fear tightening in his stomach as he tried to maintain his composure. They can sense the frozen temporal energies that surround us, the stagnant aura of our cursed existence. To them, we are like stable points in a fractured landscape. You, however, are an anomaly, an intruder from the unfrozen flow of time, and therefore, a potential target. At that instant, the distorted creature emitted a guttural sound, a chilling mix of a roar and a hiss, and began to shamble towards them with a disturbing, uneven pace. Ali felt the true gravity of his situation sink in. This was not merely a city frozen in time, it was a place haunted by the warped remnants of that frozen time. I must find shelter. I cannot remain exposed here, Ali said, his gaze flicking between the approaching creature and the frozen Queen Zahra. But how can I possibly aid you and your people? Seek the lost past, traveler from Ishraq. Seek the place that is no longer touched by the sun of this frozen moment. There, the key to breaking Raziel's curse lies hidden. And be wary of the temporal echoes, for they guard the secrets of this afflicted isle. Ali nodded, a newfound determination hardening his gaze. He had been tossed onto this shore by fate, and perhaps it was his destiny to become the savior of this forgotten kingdom. As the distorted creature lurched closer, Ali turned and fled, seeking refuge within the silent sandstone labyrinth of the frozen city, searching for a clue that might lead him to the lost past of Queen Zahra's realm. His journey had only just begun, and the mysteries and dangers of the Isle of Asmar awaited. Ali fled through the silent sandstone alleys of Asmar, his heart pounding in his chest. The distorted creature, a nightmarish chimera of desert beasts, pursued him with its disjointed, terrifying gait. Its multiple eyes darted erratically, and its guttural roars echoed eerily through the frozen stillness. Ali risked a glance over his shoulder to see the creature lurching closer, its form flickering as if caught between moments. He ducked into a seemingly abandoned spice merchant's shop, the heavy wooden door creaking ominously despite the frozen stillness that gripped everything else. Inside, the air was thick with the ghostly scent of long-lost aromas. Cinnamon, saffron, and frankincense hung heavy in the immobile air. Jars filled with solidified spices sat on shelves, their surfaces covered in a layer of frost. Behind the counter, the figure of the merchant stood frozen, his hand eternally reaching for a set of ancient scales. Ali pressed himself against a wall, listening intently for the sounds of the creature. The silence outside was broken only by the faint whistling of the wind, carrying fine sand through the deserted streets. After what felt like an age, he cautiously peered through a crack in the shuttered window. The distorted beast was nowhere in sight. Breathing a sigh of relief, Ali knew he couldn't linger. He needed to find clues about the place that no longer exists. He remembered Queen Zahra's words about seeking the lost past. He began to explore the frozen shop more carefully. On a dusty shelf, behind a row of frozen dates, he found a collection of ancient scrolls tied with faded silk. His fingers brushed against the brittle parchment, and he carefully unrolled one of them. The script was an elegant, flowing calligraphy he had never seen before, but interspersed were pictograms that seemed to depict celestial events and geographical landmarks. One series of images caught his eye. It showed the island of Asmar, but its shape was subtly different. There was a large inlet on the western side that wasn't present on the coastline he had observed earlier. Leading inland from this inlet was a depiction of a sprawling oasis, teeming with life and marked with a symbol of a crescent moon and a star. Could this be the place Queen Zahra spoke of? A part of the island that had vanished? The symbol of the crescent moon and star resonated with the eastern theme of the island. Ali carefully rolled up the scroll and tucked it into his satchel. He continued his search, hoping to find more fragments of this lost past. In a nearby building, which appeared to have been a scholar's library, Ali found shelves upon shelves of frozen texts. He ran his fingers over the spines of the ancient books, their pages fused together by the unnatural cold. On a large, ornate table, a scroll lay partially unfurled, depicting a map. With bated breath, Ali carefully examined it. To his astonishment, it mirrored the depiction on the scroll he had found in the spice shop. The inlet and the oasis were clearly marked on the western side of the island. As Ali traced the lines of the map with his finger, a faint tremor ran through the frozen city. The air grew colder, and a low, guttural growl echoed from the streets outside. The distorted creature had found him again. Knowing he had no time to lose, Ali quickly memorized the key features of the map, focusing on the location of the western inlet and the oasis. He then carefully rolled up the scroll and added it to his collection. He had to get out of here. He cautiously made his way back into the deserted street, peering around the corners of the frozen buildings. The distorted beast was lumbering towards him, its multiple eyes fixated on his position. This time, it seemed more agile and aggressive, its movements less jerky and more purposeful. Ali knew he couldn't outrun it in a straight line. He needed to use the environment to his advantage. He darted into a narrow alleyway, the high, frozen walls providing a temporary shield. He could hear the creature crashing through the frozen market stalls behind him, its roars growing closer. The alley opened into a small courtyard where a petrified fountain stood frozen mid-spray. Ali noticed a series of sturdy wooden beams that had once supported an awning over the courtyard. With a burst of adrenaline, he leaped onto the base of the fountain and then onto the lowest beam. He quickly clambered upwards, hoping to reach the rooftops. The distorted creature reached the courtyard and looked up, its multiple eyes filled with a terrifying mix of hunger and frustration. It lunged at the beams, its claws scraping against the frozen wood. Ali climbed higher, moving quickly across the network of frozen beams, using the petrified structures of the city as his makeshift path. He could hear the creature crashing below him, its heavy body shaking the frozen ground. He knew it was only a matter of time before it found a way to reach him. He had to find the western side of the island, the place marked on the ancient maps, the place that no longer existed in this frozen present. Perhaps there, he would find the key to breaking the curse and bringing warmth and life back to the silent sandstone city of Asmar. His journey was far from over, and the frozen city held many more secrets and dangers waiting to be unearthed. Ali scrambled across the frozen rooftops of Asmar, the wind whipping his robes around him like the ghostly arms of a long-lost spirit. From this elevated vantage point, the true extent of the city's frozen state was even more apparent. Below, the streets were still, the figures trapped in their final moments like statues in a grand, macabre display. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional creak of ice and the whisper of the wind carrying fine grains of sand from the nearby dunes. He moved cautiously, using the frozen awnings and archways as stepping stones. The air was bitingly cold, and the slick surfaces made his progress treacherous. He had to focus, one step at a time, his eyes constantly scanning the rooftops and the streets below for any sign of the distorted creature that hunted him. As he traversed a particularly wide chasm between two buildings, by inching across a thick, frozen banner, he noticed something peculiar in the courtyard below. Unlike the other frozen inhabitants, a group of figures huddled near a petrified fountain seemed to possess a faint, shimmering aura around them. They were dressed in garments of a style Ali had not seen before, adorned with intricate patterns and symbols that hinted at a different era. Their faces, though frozen, held expressions of deep sorrow and a strange kind of knowing. Could these be remnants of the lost past Queen Zahra had spoken of? Perhaps they were inhabitants of Asmar from before the Shadow King's curse had fully taken hold, somehow partially shielded from its full effect. He made a mental note of their location, hoping to find a way down to the courtyard later. Continuing his rooftop journey towards the west, following the general direction indicated by the ancient map he had briefly studied, Ali began to notice subtle changes in the city's architecture. The ornate sandstone structures closer to the center gradually gave way to buildings crafted from a darker volcanic rock. The designs became simpler, more austere, and the air seemed to grow heavier, carrying a faint, almost metallic scent. It felt as if he were crossing an invisible boundary, moving from the opulent heart of Asmar to an older, perhaps more formidable district. As he navigated a precarious climb across a frozen dome, a shadow fell over him. He instinctively ducked, his heart leaping into his throat. Looking up, he saw a different kind of time-warped creature circling overhead. This one resembled a giant vulture, its wings partially translucent and flickering in and out of existence. Its beak was elongated and razor-sharp, and its eyes glowed with an unsettling, otherworldly light. Ali knew he couldn't outrun this aerial predator on the open rooftops. He needed to find cover. He spotted a dilapidated tower in the distance, its upper levels partially collapsed, but still offering potential shelter. He changed direction, scrambling towards the tower as quickly and silently as possible. The giant vulture screeched, a sound that seemed to tear through the frozen silence of the city, and began to descend, its shadow growing larger as it approached. Ali reached the base of the tower and desperately searched for a way inside. The main entrance was blocked by a massive pile of frozen rubble. He circled the tower, his eyes scanning for any opening. Finally, he spotted a narrow, arched window on the lower level, partially obscured by frozen vines. He clambered over the rubble and managed to squeeze through the opening, landing with a thud on the cold stone floor inside. The interior of the tower was dark and dusty, filled with the remnants of what appeared to have been an astronomical observatory. Frozen celestial charts covered the walls, and a large, intricately crafted astrolabe sat motionless on a stone pedestal. The air was thick with the smell of dust and something else, something ancient and faintly magical. Ali caught his breath, listening for any sign of the giant vulture. He could hear its screeching circling the tower outside. He knew he couldn't stay here for long, but perhaps this place held another clue to the lost past. He examined the frozen charts on the walls, hoping to find a celestial alignment or a constellation that might match the crescent moon and star symbol on the ancient map. As he studied one particularly detailed chart, his fingers brushed against a loose section of the wall. Behind it, he discovered a narrow alcove, hidden from view. Inside the alcove, resting on a small cushion of faded velvet, was a single object, a tarnished silver astrolabe, smaller and more intricately detailed than the larger one in the center of the room. It was covered in tiny symbols and engravings that seemed to hum with a faint, dormant energy. Ali carefully picked up the silver astrolabe. It felt surprisingly warm in his hands, and as he held it, fragmented images flashed through his mind, glimpses of the island bathed in sunlight, the oasis teeming with life, and people dressed in the attire he had seen on the shimmering figures in the courtyard below. Could this astrolabe be a key to unlocking the memories of the lost past? And could it guide him to the place that no longer existed in this frozen time? He clutched the astrolabe tightly, a renewed sense of hope flickering within him. The path ahead was still fraught with danger, but now he had another tool, a whisper from a forgotten time, to aid him in his quest to break the curse of Asmar. Clutching the tarnished silver astrolabe, Ali felt a surge of hope amidst the cold stillness of the observatory tower. The fragmented visions he had experienced upon touching it hinted at a time when Asmar flourished, before the Shadow King Raziel cast his freezing curse. He examined the intricate carvings on the astrolabe, tiny constellations and symbols etched into its surface. It felt warm to the touch, pulsating with a faint, almost imperceptible energy. He sat on the cold stone floor, carefully turning the astrolabe in his hands, trying to decipher the meaning of the symbols. As he focused his gaze on a particular arrangement of miniature stars, another vision flickered in his mind. He saw the western side of the island as depicted on the ancient maps, a vibrant oasis, its lush greenery reflecting in the still waters of a wide lake. Camels drank peacefully at the water's edge, and people in colorful attire moved among palm-thatched dwellings, their laughter echoing in the warm air. Dominating the scene was a magnificent structure built of white stone, its architecture unlike anything he had seen in the frozen city of Asmar. A large golden crescent moon adorned its highest dome. The vision faded, leaving Ali with a clearer image of the place that no longer exists. The oasis was real, and the white-domed structure seemed significant, perhaps a temple or a royal palace. The crescent moon symbol on the map and now on this building reinforced its importance within the kingdom of Asmar. Ali stood up, his resolve strengthened. He needed to reach the western side of the island and find this lost oasis. Perhaps the precious thing Queen Zahra spoke of was located within that white-domed structure. He carefully tucked the silver astrolabe into his satchel, feeling its gentle warmth against his side. He made his way back to the narrow window and peered out. The giant, time-warped vulture was still circling the tower, its shadow occasionally darkening the entrance. Ali knew he had to be cautious. He decided to wait for a while, hoping the creature would eventually move on. While he waited, he examined the larger frozen astrolabe on the pedestal. It was far more ornate than the silver one, but it felt cold and inert. He ran his fingers over its intricate carvings, noticing that many of the symbols matched those on the silver astrolabe. Perhaps the smaller one was a key to unlocking the secrets held within the larger frozen instrument. He carefully placed the silver astrolabe against a specific point on the larger one, guided by a faint resonance he felt in his hands. As the two instruments touched, a soft, ethereal light emanated from the larger astrolabe. Frozen gears within its complex mechanism began to turn slowly, and the celestial charts on the walls flickered with newfound energy. Ali watched in amazement as the charts began to shift, displaying the night sky as it might have appeared in different eras. He focused on the constellations depicted around the crescent moon symbol. As he manipulated the silver astrolabe, aligning its symbols with those on the larger one, a specific date seemed to lock into place on one of the charts, a date long before the architecture of the frozen city he had explored. At that moment, the image of a map appeared on a section of the wall, projected by the larger astrolabe. It was a detailed map of the island of Asmar, and to Ali's astonishment, it showed the western oasis, the large lake, and the river that connected it to the eastern side of the island, where the frozen city now stood. The white domed structure was clearly marked near the center of the oasis. More importantly, the map showed the coastline as it had been before. A significant portion of what was now frozen sea on the western side was depicted as land, a fertile plain that stretched out towards the horizon. The inlet leading to the oasis was much wider and deeper, suggesting it was once a major waterway. As Ali absorbed this information, a wave of understanding washed over him. The place that no longer exists was not entirely gone. It was submerged, or perhaps frozen beneath the layers of time and ice. The change in the coastline suggested a cataclysmic event, or perhaps the gradual effect of the Shadow King's curse. The map on the wall began to fade, and the larger astrolabe returned to its inert state. Ali knew he had seen enough. He now had a clearer picture of where he needed to go. The western oasis was the key. He carefully made his way back to the window. The giant vulture was no longer circling the tower. Taking his chance, Ali clambered out and onto the rooftops, heading west with renewed determination. The silver astrolabe in his satchel felt like a beacon, guiding him towards the lost past and the hope of breaking the curse that held Asmar captive in its frozen embrace. The journey would be long and perilous, but Ali now knew the destination. Leaving behind the ruins of the observatory tower, Ali navigated the frozen rooftops of Asmar, his sights set on the western horizon. The ancient map he had glimpsed indicated that the oasis lay beyond a range of wind-sculpted rock formations that marked the edge of the submerged land. The journey would be arduous, crossing not only the frozen city, but also the desolate expanse beyond. As he finally descended from the last of the city's frozen structures, he found himself on a vast plain of ice-covered sand dunes. The wind, though still, had sculpted the frozen sand into bizarre and beautiful formations, resembling petrified waves and ghostly minarets. The silence here was even more profound than within the city walls, a stark and unnerving emptiness that stretched in every direction. The sun beat down on the icy landscape, creating a blinding glare that forced Ali to squint. The air was dry and bitingly cold, and the only sound was the crunch of his boots on the frozen sand. He walked for what felt like hours, the landscape unchanging, a monotonous expanse of white and blue under the unforgiving desert sun. He kept the general direction of the setting sun as his guide, hoping it would lead him towards the western coast. The silver astrolabe, nestled safely in his satchel, offered a silent promise of the lush oasis that awaited him. As the day wore on, the wind began to pick up, not the howling sirocco of the sandstorm that had brought him to the island, but a cold, whispering breeze that carried with it fine particles of ice and sand. The wind began to carve new patterns into the surface of the frozen dunes, creating swirling eddies of ice crystals that danced across his path. Suddenly, he spotted movement in the distance. A dark shape, larger than a man, was slowly making its way across the frozen sands. Ali's heart pounded with apprehension. He had encountered two types of time-warped creatures so far, and neither had been friendly. He cautiously moved behind a large frozen dune, using it as cover while he observed the approaching figure. As it drew closer, Ali could make out its form more clearly. It resembled a massive sand scorpion, but its exoskeleton was made of a strange, obsidian-like material that shimmered in the sunlight. Its pincers were enormous and tipped with razor-sharp edges, and its multiple eyes, set around its segmented head, glowed with a malevolent green light. Unlike the other creatures he had seen, this one moved with a terrifying fluidity and purpose. Ali knew he couldn't outrun such a creature across the open ice. He needed to find a way to evade it, or, if necessary, defend himself. He scanned his surroundings for any potential weapon or hiding place. The frozen dunes offered little cover, and there were no structures in sight. Just as the giant scorpion seemed to spot him, its green eyes fixing on his position behind the dune, Ali noticed a series of large, wind-sculpted rocks in the distance, their forms resembling ancient, weathered statues. They were still some distance away, but they offered the only potential refuge in this desolate landscape. Taking a deep breath, Ali sprang from behind the dune and began to run towards the rock formations, his boots slipping on the icy surface. The giant scorpion hissed, a sound like hot sand being poured onto ice, and began to pursue him, its multiple legs moving with surprising speed across the frozen sands. The chase was on, a desperate race against a terrifying predator across a landscape frozen in time. Ali pushed himself to his limits, his lungs burning with the cold air, his legs aching with each step. He glanced back to see the scorpion gaining on him, its massive pincers snapping menacingly. He finally reached the wind-sculpted rocks, scrambling behind the largest one just as the scorpion lunged at him, its pincers slamming into the frozen sand where he had been moments before. Ali pressed himself against the cold stone, his heart pounding in his chest. The scorpion circled the rocks, its green eyes searching for him. Ali could hear its clicking mandibles and the scraping of its legs against the frozen ground. He knew he couldn't stay hidden here forever. He needed to find a way to escape or to somehow deter this formidable creature. As he cautiously peered around the edge of the rock, he noticed something embedded in the side of the stone, a dark, smooth shard that looked out of place amongst the rough, weathered surface. He reached out and pulled it free. It was a piece of obsidian, polished smooth by the wind and the passage of time. An idea sparked in his mind. He remembered the obsidian statue of Queen Zahra. Perhaps there was a connection. He waited for the scorpion to move around the other side of the rock, then quickly darted out, holding the obsidian shard in front of him. As the scorpion turned to face him, Ali held out the shard. For a moment, the creature paused, its green eyes fixated on the dark, reflective surface. Then, it let out a strange, almost hissing sound, and recoiled slightly, as if repelled by the obsidian. Ali didn't hesitate. He seized the opportunity and sprinted towards the next group of wind-sculpted rocks, the obsidian shard held firmly in his hand. The giant scorpion hesitated for a moment, then resumed its pursuit. But this time, it seemed more cautious, keeping a slight distance. Ali realized that the obsidian had some effect on the creature. Perhaps it was connected to the Shadow King's magic, or to the history of Asmar. Whatever the reason, it gave him a chance to escape. He continued his journey across the frozen sands, using the wind-sculpted rocks as cover, the obsidian shard his only defense against the horrors of the Isle of Frozen Time, his hope still fixed on reaching the lost oasis and uncovering the secrets that lay hidden within its frozen heart. Ali continued his trek across the frozen desert, the obsidian shard clutched tightly in his hand. The encounter with the giant scorpion had left him shaken, but more determined than ever to reach the western oasis. The memory of the vibrant life he had glimpsed through the silver astrolabe fueled his weary steps across the icy expanse. As he pressed onward, the wind-sculpted rock formations became more frequent, rising like ancient sentinels from the frozen sand. Their shapes were bizarre and captivating, resembling colossal figures draped in flowing robes or mythical beasts frozen mid-roar. The whispering wind seemed to echo through their hollowed-out forms, carrying faint, ethereal sounds that Ali couldn't quite decipher. He noticed that the obsidian shard seemed to hum faintly whenever he passed near these rock formations, a subtle vibration that resonated in his hand. He wondered if the rocks themselves held some connection to the curse or the history of Asmar. Perhaps they were petrified remnants of an even older civilization, guarding secrets lost to the frozen time. After what felt like days of relentless travel, the landscape began to change. The endless expanse of ice-covered dunes gradually gave way to a more broken terrain, with jagged peaks of ice and deep, frozen ravines. The air grew even colder, and a thick fog began to roll in, reducing visibility to only a few paces. Ali moved cautiously through the fog, the obsidian shard held out before him like a guiding light. The silence was thick and oppressive, broken only by the soft crunch of his footsteps on the frozen ground and the occasional sigh of the wind through the icy peaks. He felt a growing sense of unease, as if unseen eyes were watching him from the swirling mist. Suddenly, the fog parted briefly, revealing a breathtaking sight. Before him lay a vast depression in the frozen landscape, and within it, the unmistakable outline of the oasis he had seen in his vision. Palm trees, their fronds encased in shimmering ice, stood motionless around a large lake, its surface frozen solid. The white-domed structure, adorned with a golden crescent moon, rose majestically from the center of the oasis, its smooth surfaces reflecting the pale sunlight filtering through the fog. But the oasis was not deserted. Scattered among the frozen palms and around the edge of the lake were figures, unlike any Ali had encountered before. They were tall and slender, their bodies seemingly formed from pure ice, their features sharp and angular. They stood motionless, like statues carved from glacial ice, their gaze fixed on Ali as he approached. A wave of apprehension washed over him. These were clearly the guardians of the oasis, their silent presence radiating an aura of ancient power. He approached slowly and cautiously, the obsidian shard still in his hand. As he drew closer, the ice guardians began to move. Not with the jerky, erratic movements of the time-warped creatures he had encountered earlier, but with a slow, deliberate grace. They glided across the frozen ground, their icy forms shimmering in the light, and began to encircle him. Ali stopped, holding his ground. He didn't sense malice from them, but rather a profound sense of watchfulness, as if they were testing his worthiness to enter the sacred oasis. He held up the obsidian shard, hoping it might have some effect on them, as it had on the giant scorpion. The ice guardians paused, their crystalline eyes fixed on the dark shard. Then, one of them, taller and more ornate than the others, stepped forward. It raised a hand formed of pure ice and gestured towards the white-domed structure in the center of the oasis. Ali understood the silent invitation. The guardians were not going to attack him, at least not yet. They were leading him towards the structure, towards the heart of the lost oasis. He lowered the obsidian shard and followed the ice guardian, his heart pounding with anticipation and a touch of trepidation. What awaited him within that white-domed building? Was the precious thing Queen Zahra spoke of hidden there? And what other secrets did this oasis frozen in time hold? He was about to find out. The journey had been long and perilous, but he had finally reached his destination. The fate of Asmar might very well rest on what he discovered within the silent heart of this icy paradise. The ice guardians glided silently before Ali, leading him towards the majestic white-domed structure that stood at the center of the frozen oasis. As they approached, Ali could see intricate carvings etched into its smooth, icy walls, depicting scenes of a vibrant kingdom, with people dressed in rich garments and celebrating joyous occasions. The golden crescent moon atop the dome shimmered faintly, casting an ethereal glow upon the frozen landscape. They reached a grand entrance, a towering archway crafted from pure, translucent ice. The ice guardians stepped aside, allowing Ali to pass through. He hesitated for a moment, a sense of awe and anticipation filling him, then stepped into the structure. The interior was a vast chamber, its walls lined with more intricate ice carvings, that told the history of Asmar. Frozen tapestries depicting bustling marketplaces and serene gardens hung suspended in the air. In the center of the chamber, bathed in a soft blue light that seemed to emanate from the ice itself, stood a magnificent ice sculpture. It was a giant bloom, its petals crafted from delicate layers of frozen water, radiating a powerful, chilling energy. Ali recognized it instantly from the visions Queen Zahra had shown him in his mind. This was the source of the curse, the frozen bloom that held Asmar captive in its timeless embrace. As he gazed at the frozen bloom, the mental voice of Queen Zahra echoed in his mind, stronger and clearer than before. Brave traveler, you have reached the heart of the sorcery. This bloom is the essence of the Shadow King Raziel's dark magic, the very core of the curse that binds our realm. Then how do we break this enchantment, Your Majesty? Ali asked, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. The bloom must be destroyed, but its power is immense, and it will resist. The precious thing that Raziel lost, the key to severing his connection to this realm, lies hidden near the bloom. Seek it out, for it is your only weapon. Queen Zahra's mental voice faded, leaving Ali alone with the silent ice guardians and the pulsating energy of the frozen bloom. He began to examine the area around the sculpture, his eyes searching for any clue, any sign of the precious thing. Scattered around the base of the frozen bloom were several pedestals made of ice, each holding a different object encased in frost. One held a frozen scroll, its ancient script illegible through the ice. Another displayed a jeweled dagger, its blade shimmering with an unnatural cold. A third held a small, intricately carved wooden box, its surface covered in frost patterns. Ali approached a fourth pedestal, and his heart skipped a beat. Resting upon it was a necklace, crafted from a smooth, white seashell that looked strangely familiar. It was identical to the one he had found near the frozen lake on the western coast. He reached out and carefully took the necklace from the pedestal. It felt surprisingly warm in his hand, pulsing with a gentle, lifelike energy. As he held the seashell necklace, images flooded his mind, visions of Queen Zahra, not as the frozen obsidian statue, but as a young woman, laughing and joyful, wearing the very same necklace. He saw her standing by the shores of a vibrant, unfrozen sea, the sun shining down upon her. A wave of understanding washed over Ali. The seashell necklace was not just a precious object. It was deeply connected to Queen Zahra herself, a symbol of a time before the curse, a relic of the lost warmth and life of Asmar. This must be the precious thing Raziel had lost, something of immense sentimental value to the queen, and therefore a vulnerability in his dark magic. At that moment, the frozen bloom began to glow with an even more intense blue light, and the ice guardians around Ali stirred, their crystalline forms shifting. A low, guttural growl echoed through the chamber, and Ali realized that the time-warped creatures he had encountered outside had somehow breached the defenses of the oasis and were now converging on the structure. He knew he had to act quickly. He held the seashell necklace tightly in his hand and approached the frozen bloom, feeling its intense cold radiating outwards. The ice began to crackle around him, and the chamber filled with a chilling wind. As he reached the base of the frozen bloom, the ice guardians moved to protect him, their icy forms shimmering as they confronted the encroaching time-warped creatures. Ali raised the seashell necklace, focusing all his will and hope into the small white object. He brought the necklace down sharply against the base of the frozen bloom. At the moment of contact, a blinding white light erupted, engulfing the chamber. Ali felt a surge of immense power coursing through him, and the ice around him began to shatter and melt. The chamber shook violently, and the air filled with the sound of cracking ice and rushing water. The curse of Asmar, held captive for so long, was finally beginning to break. As the blinding white light subsided, Ali found himself standing in the center of the chamber, but everything around him was transforming rapidly. The ice that had encased the walls and floor was melting away, revealing the intricate stonework and mosaic patterns of a magnificent ancient temple. The air, once biting cold, was now filled with a gentle warmth and the sound of dripping water. Before him, where the frozen bloom had stood, lay a pool of clear, shimmering water. From the depths of the pool, a single radiant lotus flower bloomed, its petals of vibrant gold, pulsating with a life-giving energy. The light that now filled the chamber emanated from this golden lotus. The ice guardians, who had stood as silent sentinels, began to dissipate, their forms dissolving into droplets of water that flowed towards the pool, nourishing the blooming lotus. The guttural growls of the time-warped creatures faded away, replaced by the sound of birdsong and the distant roar of unfrozen waves crashing against the shore. From the pool of water, a figure began to emerge. It was Queen Zahra, no longer encased in obsidian, but radiant and alive, wearing a gown of shimmering silk, the color of the twilight sky. The seashell necklace rested gently around her neck. She smiled at Ali, her eyes filled with gratitude and warmth. "You have done it, brave traveler from Ishraq," she said, her voice like the gentle murmur of a desert spring. "You have broken the Shadow King's curse and brought life back to Asmar." As Queen Zahra stepped out of the pool, the air in the chamber began to resonate with the sounds of life. From beyond the temple walls, Ali could hear the joyous cries of people awakening, the laughter of children, and the vibrant sounds of a city coming back to life after a long, frozen slumber. Queen Zahra led Ali out of the temple, into the heart of the oasis. The frozen palms were now swaying in a warm breeze, their fronds rustling like whispered secrets. The lake shimmered under the bright sunlight, reflecting the azure sky. People were emerging from their frozen slumber, their faces etched with confusion and then elation as they realized the curse had been lifted. They gathered around Queen Zahra and Ali, their voices filled with thanks and wonder. Ali spent several days in the revitalized oasis of Asmar, witnessing the joyous reunion of families and the rebuilding of their vibrant community. He learned more about their rich history and culture, and the tale of the Shadow King Raziel, whose envy had led to the devastating curse. He understood that the seashell necklace, a symbol of love and life within Asmar, had been Raziel's downfall, its pure essence a direct counter to his dark magic. The time came for Ali to bid farewell to Queen Zahra and the people of Asmar. They showered him with gifts of gratitude, intricate carpets, precious jewels, and fine spices, but the greatest gift was their heartfelt appreciation. Queen Zahra presented him with a beautiful compass, its needle always pointing towards Ishraq, to guide him safely home. As Ali set sail in a newly repaired dhow, its sails catching the warm sea breeze, he looked back at the Isle of Asmar. It no longer appeared as a desolate, frozen wasteland, but as a lush, vibrant jewel in the Arabian Sea, teeming with life and color under the warm desert sun. Clutching the compass Queen Zahra had given him, Ali navigated the familiar waters towards his homeland. He recounted his incredible adventure to the sailors he met along the way, tales of a frozen kingdom, a powerful curse, and a brave fisherman who brought back the warmth of time. When Ali finally returned to his village of Kamar in the Sultanate of Ishraq, he was greeted with joyous celebrations. He shared his extraordinary story with his family and neighbors, and though some found it hard to believe, the intricately crafted compass, always pointing unerringly towards the Isle of Asmar, served as proof of his incredible journey. Ali returned to his life as a fisherman, but he was forever changed by his adventure. He had faced the stillness of time and emerged a hero, carrying the memory of a forgotten kingdom brought back to life. And so, the tale of Ali of Kamar, the fisherman who saved the Isle of Asmar from an eternal winter, became a legend whispered through the generations under the starry skies of the East, a testament to courage, hope, and the enduring power of time and life. And here the story ends. May Allah bless your time with happiness. Follow more stories on the Eastern Nights channel. If you like the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to receive all new updates, and let us know your opinion in the comments.